I sit in the quiet solitude of my car, hours after Lyra's wedding, my hands still trembling from the earthquake that just rocked our family. I never imagined that a mother's cruel words, spoken amidst the shimmering joy of her favored daughter's day, could cleave my life in two and reveal a strength I didn't know I possessed. The humiliation was a suffocating cloak when Serafina, our mother, declared I only deserved dry bread, in front of 200 witnesses. But what I did next, what I chose to unveil, silenced every gasp, every whispered judgment, and etched a new truth onto all their faces. To understand that life-altering night, you must journey back through a lifetime of quiet disparities. In the Vance family, love was a finite resource, always flowing in abundance towards my younger sister, Lyra. I am Alara, the elder, the steadfast accountant, the practical daughter perpetually eclipsed by Lyra's radiant sparkle. Lyra has always been Serafina's golden child. Serafina has honed the art of subtle favoritism into a precise, devastating weapon. She never explicitly said she loved Lyra more, but her every action screamed it. When Lyra attended the prestigious St. Catherine's Academy, I was relegated to the local public school. The family budget, Serafina explained, could only stretch so far for one private education. The comparisons began early and never ceased. Lyra inherited our grandmother's delicate features, while I bore our father, Alaric's, broader shoulders and what Serafina diplomatically termed a more sturdy build. Lyra's hair cascaded in effortless waves. Mine demanded an arsenal of products to appear merely presentable. These weren't just observations, they were daily pronouncements of who was the prettier, the more cherished daughter. Alaric, bless his quiet heart, retreated to his workshop whenever the tension in the air became too thick, believing peace was paramount, even if it meant silence in the face of injustice. The pattern solidified with adulthood. When Lyra envisioned her nail salon, our parents co-signed loans and provided a substantial down payment. When I sought advanced accounting certifications, I was told investing in my education was my sole responsibility, as I already held a steady job. My role as a staff accountant at Henderson Associates offers stability and pays the bills, earning me quiet respect from colleagues. But in Serafina's eyes, my steady paycheck and reliable nature paled against Lyra's entrepreneurial fire and Instagram-worthy nail artistry. The wedding planning itself became a testament to this deep-seated partiality. Months were spent researching opulent venues, Serafina insisting only the Marriott's grand ballroom was fit for her baby girl's special day. The budget swelled, absorbing years of my parents' savings. Every detail for Lyra had to be flawless. My part in this fairy tale was to disappear into the background. While Lyra's college friends filled the coveted bridesmaid roles, I was assigned the practical, thankless tasks, coordinating vendors, managing the gift table, firefighting every minor crisis. When I dared suggest a maid of honor speech, Serafina swiftly shut it down, implying I might ramble or utter something inappropriate. The title went to Lyra's best friend, Chloe, leaving me as the family coordinator, a grand title for unpaid wedding staff. Despite everything, I clung to a fragile hope. Perhaps seeing both her daughters together, bathed in the glow of such an important day, would soften Serafina's heart, reminding her she had 2 children, both deserving of her love. The wedding day dawned with the crisp promise of autumn. My stomach churned with a volatile mix of excitement and an old, familiar dread. I was determined to make it beautiful for Lyra. While she enjoyed a full glam squad at the hotel, I painstakingly styled my own hair and applied my makeup, my bathroom counter a battlefield of borrowed tools and hours of YouTube tutorials. The stark contrast wasn't lost on me, but I swallowed the familiar sting of resentment. This was Lyra's day. When Lyra emerged in her magnificent gown, the house seemed to collectively hold its breath. She was breathtaking, a vision of glowing skin and an intricate updo. "My baby," Serafina gasped, tears streaming, "you look like an absolute princess, a dream come true." The photographer captured every tearful embrace, and I instinctively stepped back, out of frame. At the church, I was guided to the 3rd row, while Lyra's bridesmaids occupied the 2nd, closer to the altar. Serafina explained it away as traditional seating. Throughout the ceremony, I watched Lyra pledge her love to Reese, her fiancé, a kind software engineer who adored her. Their vows brought a genuine warmth to my heart. This was what love should be: mutual respect, unwavering affection, true partnership. Serafina, meanwhile, sobbed theatrically, dabbing her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief, proclaiming this the happiest day of her life. The reception ballroom was a winter wonderland, a breathtaking landscape of white roses and twinkling lights. I mingled politely, snapping photos, making small talk with strangers. Then came the dinner seating, table 8, near the back, far from the family tables. My companions were Reese's co-workers, pleasant but unfamiliar faces. The head table, of course, belonged to Lyra, Reese, the wedding party, and both sets of parents. I tried to convince myself that all was as it should be. This was Lyra's night. Table 8, surprisingly, offered a reprieve. Reese's colleagues, Isabella and Gideon, were genuinely interested, asking about my work at Henderson Associates. I handle accounts receivable and help small businesses manage their books, I explained. It's not glamorous, but I find it satisfying to help people understand their finances. That's so important, Gideon chimed in. We've been looking for someone to help us organize our taxes, maybe set up a better system for tracking expenses. Do you ever do freelance work? Before I could answer, Serafina's voice cut through the hum of conversation. Oh, there's my other daughter, she announced to the table, her tone laced with that familiar, condescending inflection. Alara's always been the practical one in the family. Isabella, undeterred, continued, we were just saying how valuable accounting skills are. Alara was telling us about her work with small businesses. Serafina's expression tightened imperceptibly, a telltale sign I knew all too well. Yes, well, Alara has always been good with numbers, very methodical, very reliable. A pause, pregnant with unspoken meaning. Not like Lyra, of course. Lyra has real business instincts, you know, natural entrepreneurial flair. An awkward silence descended. I tried to deflect. Lyra's salon is doing really well. She's built up quite a client base. Oh yes, Serafina purred, warming to her favorite subject. Lyra's only just started, and she already owns her own business. Such vision, such creativity. Her social media boasts thousands of followers. She's even featured in local magazines. Gideon nodded politely. That's impressive. But steady work like Alara's is really valuable too. Not everyone can be an entrepreneur. Serafina's laugh had an icy edge. Well, that's certainly true. Alara's always been more of a follower than a leader. Some people are meant for steady, behind-the-scenes work, and some people are meant to shine. My cheeks burned, but my voice remained steady. Both types of work are important, Mother. The economy needs people in all different roles. Of course, dear, she replied, patting my shoulder, a gesture more condescending than comforting. You found your niche. It's just that Lyra has such ambition, such drive. At her age, she's already accomplished so much more than most people do in a lifetime. The implication hung heavy in the air, a familiar judgment of my own perceived shortcomings. Isabella and Gideon exchanged uncomfortable glances. Actually, Isabella interjected, attempting a rescue, I think what Alara does sounds really challenging. Managing books for multiple businesses requires a lot of skill and attention to detail. Serafina waved a dismissive hand. Oh, it's fine work for someone who likes routine. Alara's always preferred the safety of a steady paycheck to the excitement of building something from scratch. She's not a risk-taker like Lyra. The words stung. There was a sliver of truth in them. I had chosen security. But hearing my life choices so casually disparaged before strangers was a searing humiliation. Lyra's salon grossed 6 figures in its first year, Serafina continued, oblivious to the discomfort she was inflicting. She's already looking at opening a second location. That's the difference between having vision and just having a job. I excused myself, claiming a need for the restroom, though in truth, I needed to compose myself before my composure shattered. As I walked away, I could still hear my mother extolling Lyra's virtues to my increasingly uncomfortable tablemates. In the sterile bathroom, I stared at my reflection, trying to remember why I was here, to celebrate Lyra's happiness, not to compete for a mother's elusive approval. I would get through this night with grace. Upon my return, Serafina had moved on. The conversation at table 8 had shifted to safer topics, but I felt the sympathetic glances of Isabella and Gideon. The damage was done, but I would try to salvage the rest of the evening. The food was exquisite, the music enchanting, and seeing Lyra's radiant happiness made the awkwardness bearable. After the formal dances, it was time for the cake cutting. Lyra and Reese's wedding cake was a majestic, tiered masterpiece, adorned with delicate sugar flowers matching Lyra's bouquet. Sourced from the city's most exclusive bakery, it was a work of art. As the photographer gathered the guests, Lyra and Reese, beaming, cut into the bottom tier. Laughter and applause filled the air as Lyra playfully dabbed frosting on Reese's cheek. Then came the tradition of personally serving cake to important guests. Lyra began, offering generous slices with hugs and kisses, starting with her new in-laws, then our parents. I stood patiently, expecting, as her sister, to be among the first. But she moved through the crowd, serving aunts, uncles, and close friends, never once meeting my gaze. I told myself she was saving family for last, but as the minutes stretched on and the pre-cut pieces dwindled, I decided to approach the table myself. Surely, it was fine for family to serve themselves. I reached for the server, the vanilla sponge and raspberry filling looking heavenly, when Serafina's voice, sharp as a whip crack, cut through the air. "Ilara, what are you doing?" I turned, startled. "I was just going to cut myself a piece of cake, Mother." "Lyra seems busy." Serafina's face was stern, almost scandalized. "That cake cost a fortune, Ilara. It's made with imported Belgian chocolate and organic vanilla from Madagascar. The flowers alone took the baker hours to create." "I know it's beautiful, Mother," I replied, confused by her intensity. "I just wanted to taste a small piece. It's a wedding cake, isn't it meant to be shared?" "Yes," she hissed, moving to block my access, "with the right people. Lyra specifically requested this cake from Bella's bakery. Do you have any idea how exclusive that place is?" Other guests began to notice, their conversations quieting. I tried to keep my voice low, respectful. "I understand it's special, Mother. I'm not trying to take more than my share. I just thought it would be nice to taste Lyra's wedding cake." Serafina looked me up and down, her gaze sweeping over my off-the-rack dress, my self-styled hair, my discount shoes. When she spoke again, her voice was a shard of ice. "Honey, with your simple lifestyle and basic tastes, you wouldn't even be able to appreciate something this sophisticated. This cake is for people who understand quality, who can recognize fine ingredients and artisanal craftsmanship." The words felt like a physical blow. Around us, the room had fallen into an unnerving quiet. "Mother, what are you trying to say?" She sighed, as if explaining the obvious to a slow child. "Ilara, you've always been perfectly content with simple, ordinary things. You shop at modest stores. You drive a used car. You live in that small apartment with basic furnishings. There's nothing wrong with that lifestyle, but it means you're not really equipped to appreciate luxury when you see it." My hands were shaking now, but I made one last attempt to defuse the situation. "I understand the cake is expensive and beautiful. I'm not asking for a huge piece. I just wanted to participate in the celebration." That's when Serafina delivered the words that would irrevocably alter everything between us. "Ilara," she declared, her voice carrying across the hushed ballroom, clear enough for dozens to hear, "someone with your simple tastes and modest means only deserves dry bread. This cake is for people who have earned the right to enjoy the finer things in life." The blow was immediate, devastating. You only deserve dry bread. From my own mother. At my sister's wedding. In front of everyone. Conversations ceased entirely. I felt the weight of every staring eye, some aghast, others averted in embarrassment. The silence stretched, an eternity of judgment. Lyra, who had been laughing across the room, turned and saw me frozen by the cake table, confronting our mother. Even from that distance, confusion morphed into dawning horror on her face. Reese's parents, refined and observant, stared at Serafina with expressions of profound shock. Whispers rippled through the guests. But Serafina wasn't finished. I'm not trying to be cruel, Ilara. I'm just being realistic. You've chosen a life of simplicity and frugality. There's honor in that. But it also means that certain experiences, certain pleasures, aren't really meant for you. I stood there, the cake server a leaden weight in my trembling hand, utterly speechless. In that agonizing moment, a lifetime of subtle put-downs, casual dismissals, and constant comparisons crystallized into this one shattering sentence. You only deserve dry bread. The silence that followed felt eternal, a vast, echoing chasm. 200 wedding guests processed what they had just witnessed. 4 years, I had accepted my role. The lesser daughter, the practical one, the child who never quite measured up. I had internalized every comparison, every dismissal, every casual cruelty disguised as an honest assessment. But standing in that opulent ballroom, surrounded by witnesses to my mother's ultimate judgment of my worth, something inside me finally, irrevocably snapped. I set the cake server down deliberately, my hands steadier now than they had been in hours. The trembling had ceased, replaced by an astonishing clarity. I wasn't going to flee to the bathroom to cry. I wasn't going to quietly retreat to my table and pretend nothing had happened. I wasn't going to smile and nod and accept this treatment one more time. Instead, I walked with purposeful strides toward the small stage where the DJ's equipment sat. The band was on break, the microphone unused. I had never sought the spotlight, never demanded attention. But tonight, that would change. I stepped onto the platform, reached for the microphone, and the sharp feedback squeal that followed instantly commanded attention. Conversation died. Heads turned. 200 eyes fixed on me. Excuse me, everyone, I said, my voice cutting clearly through the sound system, gaining strength with each word. I'd like to say a few words. I saw Lyra by the cake table, her face a mixture of confusion and dawning concern. Reese had moved to stand beside her, his hand resting protectively on her waist. My parents stood frozen, Alaric's face pale, Serafina's expression morphing from surprise to dawning horror as she grasped what was unfolding. My name is Ilara Vance, I continued, and I am Lyra's older sister. I wasn't asked to give a speech tonight, but I believe it's time I finally spoke up. The room became utterly silent, the only sounds the hum of the air conditioning and the distant clatter of kitchen staff. Even the children seemed to sense the gravity, hushing their chatter. I want to start by saying how deeply I love my sister, Lyra. Growing up with her has been one of the greatest joys of my life. I've watched her transform from a curious girl into the beautiful, successful woman you see today. Lyra, you deserve all the happiness in the world. And Reese, you are gaining an incredible wife. Lyra's eyes filled with tears, and she mouthed, "Thank you," from across the room. Some of the tension in the crowd visibly eased. This began like a traditional sister of the bride speech. But tonight, I continued, my voice now resonant with an unwavering conviction, I learned something about family that fractured my heart. I learned that sometimes, the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the ones who impose the harshest conditions on that love. The atmosphere shifted again. People exchanged uneasy glances, sensing this speech was heading somewhere profound and unexpected. Serafina took a step forward, as if to intervene, but Alaric gently held her arm. Just moments ago, someone who should cherish me more than anyone else in this world told me that I only deserve dry bread. She said this because I'm not fancy enough, not successful enough, not worthy enough to share in the same simple pleasures as everyone else. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Several people looked directly at Serafina, who had gone utterly white. Lyra covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with shock and dawning comprehension. "And you know what?" I said, my voice now a clear, unwavering bell. "Maybe she's right. Maybe I do only deserve dry bread." A wave of confusion swept over the faces in the room. Where was I going with this? Because dry bread represents something that this family has forgotten how to value. Dry bread is honest. It's real. It's sustenance without pretense. It doesn't try to be something it's not, and it doesn't apologize for being simple. I paused, my gaze sweeping across the mesmerized faces, connecting with individuals hanging on my every word. Dry bread is authentic. And apparently, authenticity isn't valued much in this family. But you know what? I'd rather be genuine dry bread than fake, fancy cake any day of the week. A few heads in the crowd began to nod. Understanding dawned on faces throughout the room. "And since we're speaking of authenticity," I declared, "I think it's time I shared something authentic with all of you tonight." I reached into my small clutch and pulled out a folded envelope I'd carried for weeks, awaiting the right moment. Tonight, undoubtedly, had become that moment, though not in any way I had ever envisioned. Just recently, I started my own bookkeeping and financial consulting business. I kept it quiet because I wanted to ensure its success before I announced it. I wanted to have something tangible to show them. The crowd was utterly riveted. Even the catering staff had paused their work to listen. Last month, I signed contracts with 3 major clients. My little business, the one I've been running from my simple apartment with basic furnishings, is now on track to gross a significant sum in its first year. The gasps were audible, sharp. Eyebrows rose throughout the room. A tangible shift in energy pulsed through the air. Serafina looked as if she might faint. "But that's not all," I continued, my voice now laced with fierce pride. "Just yesterday, I closed on my first house. Not a condo, not a rental, but a 3-bedroom house with a yard and a 2-car garage. I paid a substantial down payment, and my mortgage is less than what most people pay in rent." Reese's father, a respected businessman, began to smile. Several other guests nodded with a profound sense of approval and respect. And this very morning before this wedding, I received a call from Patterson Industries. They want to hire me as their full-time financial consultant. The salary they offered is more than double what I currently earn. The room buzzed with whispered conversations, a rising tide of astonishment. I could feel new eyes on me, eyes filled with an interest and respect I had never received from my own family. I kept all of this quiet because I wanted to surprise my family. I thought perhaps if I achieved enough success, if I proved myself worthy enough, I might finally earn the love and respect I've been seeking my entire life. My voice caught, a momentary tremor, but I pushed through. But tonight, I realized something vital. I don't need to earn anyone's love or respect. I certainly don't need to prove my worth to people who have already decided I'm only worth dry bread. I looked directly at Serafina for the first time since taking the microphone, her face a mask of shock and wounded pride. "Lyra, I love you more than you'll ever know, and I wish you and Reese a lifetime of happiness together. You deserve every beautiful thing this world has to offer." Lyra was openly weeping now, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. Reese had his arm around her, and both stared at me with expressions of amazement and, unmistakably, pride. But I will not stay in a place where my worth is constantly questioned, where my accomplishments are dismissed, and where I'm told I don't deserve the same basic kindness extended to everyone else. I set the microphone back on its stand and stepped down from the platform. The room erupted. Aunt Eleanor, from her table near the front, led a thunderous applause. Reese's parents joined in, as did most of the guests. The sound was overwhelming, a wave of validation washing over me, unlike anything I had ever experienced. People began to rise, offering a standing ovation that stretched for what felt like an eternity. The immediate aftermath was surreal. As the applause finally subsided, I found myself surrounded by people I barely knew, all wanting to shake my hand or offer words of congratulation. Reese's uncle, the CEO of a mid-sized manufacturing company, pushed through the crowd. "Elara," he said, extending his business card. "I had no idea Reese's new sister-in-law was such an accomplished businesswoman. We've been looking for someone exactly like you to streamline our accounting. Would you be interested in discussing a consulting opportunity?" Before I could respond, Isabella from my dinner table appeared at my elbow. "Elara, after what we witnessed, I'm even more impressed by your professionalism. My husband and Gideon would love to hire you to organize our finances. Could we set up a meeting next week?" The business cards and offers kept coming. Reese's college roommate needed help with his startup. The mother of one of Lyra's bridesmaids, who owned a chain of boutiques, needed a financial consultant. Even distant relatives, people I saw perhaps once a year, approached me with newfound respect. But the person I most yearned to see was Lyra. She had stood near the cake table throughout my speech, and now she moved through the crowd toward me, her wedding dress flowing like a cloud. When she reached me, she said nothing, simply threw her arms around me, holding me tight, heedless of her expensive gown or smudged makeup. "Elara," she whispered, her voice choked with tears, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I had no idea Mother said that to you. I should have been paying attention. I should have protected you." We held each other for a long moment, the buzz of the crowd surrounding us. When we finally pulled apart, Lyra's eyes were red, but her expression was fierce with determination. "I've been a terrible sister," she continued. "I've let Mother treat you badly for years, and I never spoke up because I was afraid of losing her approval. But what you just did, standing up for yourself like that, it was the bravest thing I've ever seen." "Lyra, this is your wedding day," I said, trying to deflect her apology. "You don't need to worry about family drama tonight." "Yes, I do," she insisted. "Because family means protecting each other, and I haven't been protecting you. That changes now." Reese appeared beside us, his expression serious, almost somber. "Elara," he said, "I owe you an apology too. I've been part of this family for years now, and I've seen how differently you're treated. I should have said something. What your mother said tonight was completely unacceptable, and what you did in response was incredible." Before I could reply, I heard Alaric's voice behind me. "Elara, honey, can we talk?" I turned to find my father, looking older than I had ever seen him, his face pale, his hands trembling slightly. "Father," I said carefully, "what is it?" "I need to apologize to you," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I've been a coward for too many years. I've watched your mother treat you unfairly, and I've stayed quiet because I thought keeping peace was more important than standing up for what's right." He paused, struggling for words. "But tonight, hearing her say those things to you, watching you have to defend your own worth to your own family, I realized that my silence has been just as harmful as her words. I should have protected you. I should have been the father you deserved." The conversation was interrupted by Serafina's approach. She looked utterly stricken, her carefully styled hair disheveled, her makeup showing the strain. "Elara," she began, but I held up a hand. "Mother, not here. Not now. This is Lyra's wedding, and I've disrupted it enough." "But I need to explain," she insisted. "I didn't mean it the way it sounded." The crowd around us quieted, sensing another confrontation. Lyra stepped closer to me, a silent gesture of solidarity. "Yes, you did," I said simply. "And that's okay. At least now I know exactly where I stand." Serafina's face crumpled, but before she could respond, Aunt Eleanor appeared and gently took her arm. "Serafina, I think you've said enough for one evening," Aunt Eleanor said firmly. "Let's let the children enjoy the rest of the celebration." As Serafina was led away, I turned back to Lyra and Reese. Despite everything, I wanted their night to end on a positive note. You two should get back to your guests, I said. This is your party, and everyone's here to celebrate your marriage. Are you going to stay? Lyra asked hopefully. I looked around the room, taking in the faces of those who had witnessed my moment of truth. Some were family members, still processing. Others were new acquaintances who suddenly viewed me as someone worth knowing. The dynamic had shifted completely in the span of minutes. Yes, I said finally. I think I will stay. The remainder of the wedding celebration took on a profoundly different tone. Where I had been invisible, relegated to the background, I now found myself at the center of attention in the most unexpected way. The dance floor beckoned as the band resumed playing. Reese's father approached me with a warm smile. "Ilara, would you do me the honor of a dance?" he asked, extending his hand. "I think we have a lot to talk about." As we moved onto the dance floor, he leaned in. Reese has told me stories about his future in-laws, but he never mentioned how impressive his sister-in-law was. That speech took real courage. "Thank you," I replied, still somewhat bewildered by the outpouring of positive responses. I never intended to make a scene at Lyra's wedding. "Sometimes scenes make themselves," he said wisely. "The question is whether you handle them with grace or let them handle you. You chose grace." Throughout the dance, other guests approached, eager to continue conversations sparked by my speech. The manufacturing company's CEO confirmed his interest in a major consulting project. Two other business owners left their contact information, asking Reese to pass it along to me. By the time the evening wound down, I had collected more business cards than I could fit in my clutch and scheduled multiple meetings for the upcoming week. More importantly, I had experienced something I'd never felt at a family gathering before: profound respect. Lyra and Reese's grand exit was a shower of sparklers and rose petals. As the moment approached, Lyra pulled me aside. "Ilara, I want you to know that everything changes after tonight," she said, gripping my hands tightly. "I'm not going to let Mother treat you that way again. Reese and I talked, and we both agree what happened tonight was unacceptable." "Lyra, you don't need to fight my battles," I told her. "I can take care of myself." "I know you can," she replied. "You proved that tonight. But sisters should support each other, and I haven't been supporting you. That's going to change." As the sparklers illuminated the night and Lyra and Reese drove away, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't anticipated. The day had begun with me feeling invisible, undervalued. It ended with me feeling seen, respected, for the first time in a long time. The months that followed Lyra's wedding brought changes I could never have foreseen. My consulting business flourished, many new clients having been at the wedding to witness my impromptu speech. Word spread quickly in our city's business community, and soon I was booked solid with challenging, exciting projects. The Patterson Industries job offer was even better than I initially understood, coming with equity and rapid advancement potential. Within a short time, I had moved into my new house, hired 2 part-time employees to manage my growing client base, and was featured in the local business journal as an up-and-coming entrepreneur to watch. But the most significant transformations were in my family relationships. Lyra kept her promise. When Serafina made one of her typical dismissive comments during a family dinner, Lyra immediately called her out. "Mother, that's exactly the kind of comment that hurt Ilara so deeply at my wedding," Lyra said firmly. "Ilara is successful and accomplished, and she deserves the same respect you'd give anyone else." Alaric, too, began to change. He started calling me regularly, asking about my business, expressing genuine interest in my life. For the first time, I felt like I had a real relationship with him, not just the polite distance that had characterized our interactions for so long. My relationship with Serafina proved more complicated. She attempted several apologies, but they were always laced with qualifications, never quite grasping the impact of her behavior. "I never meant to hurt you," she would say. "I was just trying to encourage you to reach for more." Eventually, I had to set clear boundaries. I would attend family gatherings and maintain a cordial relationship, but I would no longer tolerate being treated as a lesser member of the family. When she made comparisons, I would calmly change the subject or, if necessary, leave the room. The most unexpected outcome was how the story of my wedding speech transcended our family and social circle. Reese's aunt, who worked in marketing, had recorded part of my speech and shared it. Soon, I was being asked to speak at women's networking events and professional conferences about standing up for oneself and recognizing one's own worth. My dry bread metaphor resonated with audiences in ways I never could have predicted. Women approached me after these speaking engagements to share their own stories of feeling undervalued or overlooked. "Your speech gave me permission to stop apologizing for being myself," one woman told me. "I realized I'd been spending so much energy trying to prove my worth to people who had already decided I wasn't valuable." As I reflect on that transformative night, sitting in the office of my now thriving financial consulting firm, I'm struck by how one moment of refusing to accept unacceptable treatment reshaped the entire trajectory of my life. My relationship with Lyra has never been stronger. She and Reese have become cherished friends, and Lyra frequently refers clients to my business. She's also become fiercely protective of our bond, making it clear to Serafina that any disrespect toward me is disrespect toward her as well. My father and I have built the relationship I always wished for. He regularly stops by my office just to chat, and he's become one of my biggest champions, proudly telling his friends about his successful daughter's achievements. The situation with Serafina has stabilized into a kind of uneasy peace. She seems to understand that the dynamic between us has permanently shifted. While she may never fully comprehend the damage her years of favoritism caused, she's learned to treat me with basic respect. But perhaps the most important change has been internal. I no longer seek validation from people who have proven incapable of providing it. I've learned to recognize my own worth, independent of anyone else's opinion. And I've discovered that self-respect is far more valuable than the approval of others. As GLASP Insights often highlight, this journey, though painful, led me to that vital truth. The business success that followed my wedding speech has been gratifying, but it wasn't the speech itself that changed my life. It was the decision to stop accepting treatment that diminished my sense of self-worth. It was choosing to believe that I deserved better, even when the people closest to me suggested otherwise. I've learned that authenticity isn't always comfortable or convenient, but it is always worthwhile. When you stop pretending to be smaller than you are to make others comfortable, you create space for your true self to emerge and thrive. The dry bread comment, meant to confine me, actually freed me from a place I should never have been. Sometimes, the most hurtful statements become the catalysts for the most profound positive changes. I think about that moment often when I'm working with clients who undervalue themselves or accept less than they deserve in their professional lives. I share my story not as a tale of revenge or triumph over family dysfunction, but as an example of what becomes possible when you decide to advocate for yourself with courage and grace. My mother's words were meant to diminish me, to remind me of what she saw as my proper place. Instead, they became the fierce push I needed to finally step into my full potential and claim the life I had been too afraid to pursue. Now, when someone tries to convince me that I should accept less, or that my standards are too high, or that I should be grateful for crumbs when I could have the whole meal, I remember that night at Lyra's wedding. I remember the power that came from finally saying no to being treated poorly. And I remember that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is simply refuse to accept unacceptable treatment. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand up and tell your truth, even when your voice shakes, and even when you're not sure anyone will listen. What would you do if someone told you that you only deserve dry bread? Would you accept their assessment of your worth? Or would you show them what you're really made of? Because here's what I learned that night, and in all the days since: you teach people how to treat you by what you're willing to accept. And when you stop accepting treatment that diminishes your worth, you don't just change how others see you, you change how you see yourself. That wedding taught me that sometimes the most beautiful transformations come from the ugliest moments. Sometimes you have to be willing to make people uncomfortable with your truth before they'll truly see your value. And sometimes you have to be willing to shock people with your strength before they'll stop underestimating your worth. So I ask you, are you ready to stand up for your worth? Are you prepared to show the world what you're truly capable of? Because your voice matters. Your truth has power. And you deserve so much more than dry bread.